Hello there, sword friends. I'm going to give you a brief overview of my field trip to the Atlanta Blade Show. And if you're unfamiliar, Blade Show is it's a big show for swords and blades and things like that, but mostly knives. That's predominantly what's there, but from every style, from just about any manufacturer you've ever heard from every price point, and it's well worth going. Even if you're into swords more or other things more, the amount of knives they have there, the artistry and beauty that goes into some of those creations, it's absolutely, you can spend a fair amount of time, even if you're not like a big knife person. There's just a ton of amazing people and stuff to see there that you can absolutely lose days walking through and talking to some of the makers and whatnot at the event. Anyway, there's other stuff too. I used up all the time I had, which was, I got to go for a few hours. I used all my time up kind of talking and looking at stuff, but I could absolutely spend way more time. I digress. Some nuances about Blade Show that I found interesting, that maybe would be interesting to hear, is what I'm going to talk about in this video, and hopefully it's interesting. And the first thing, and I don't know if this is going to be a hot take or not, but sword makers make baby swords and knife makers make big knives. This is an opinion that I've had at least about the knife maker side for a hot minute, and this was a great event to see it in action. For folks that predominantly focus on making knives, when they dabble in swords, the swords tend to come out like big knives. And is that a bad thing? Yes, but there's also some nuance and good that goes in it. So one, like the fit and finish level is done like a custom knife, and so there's like exotic materials and cool stuff and clean lines and few gaps and stuff, like really looks fit and finished at an exceptionally high level. And so there's that. And in profile, they look great and interesting, but in practice, they often feel like way too light or wrongly balanced or often derpy in the hand. Well, that would be the best way I could describe it. And they're just not, they're missing the dynamic characteristics of what that sword should have, because it's not as important in knife making. Like, you can make a pretty squat, goofy, small, heavy knife, and it'll still feel pretty good in the hand. The tolerances to dynamically make a knife that does a good job is, I think, wider than it is on a sword. But knife makers, or sword makers who make knives, often make kind of mediocre fit and finish knives. Not always, but they don't often have like the same level of panache or craziness that the swords do, and so they tend to be simpler, and they tend to have like more flaws in them than would. Now hear me out, because you might say, well, it's bigger, or that's not true. But if you buy a $4,000 knife and a $4,000 sword, you probably expect vastly different things, and the tolerance that you would expect or have for imperfections or flaws like gaps, wavy grind lines, stuff like that, is probably going to be very small in a $4,000 knife. But there are numerous $4,000 swords that kind of wander around. They feel amazing, they do sword things well, but the durability, performance matter a little bit more than kind of the fit and finish level does often. Not to say there aren't makers that can do both, but it does seem like the sword makers have a little less priority on the looks department, and that seems to impact their knives in comparison to the competition. They might feel like really dynamically awesome knives, but it's just less of an important thing. And the knives from sword makers often have like a little more, accentuation on distal taper and some of the dynamic characteristics that would go into a sword, but it just is less meaningful when it's a knife. It's not to say that it's zero or not important, or that knife makers have no idea how knives should feel and make everything that feels like a club. No, but the priorities do seem in different areas, and it was fun to see that kind of example play out in, on a lot of tables. There are some knife makers that make really cumbersome stuff, and there are some that just need some tweaking to narrow things down, and everything in between. Anyway, it was a lot of fun to see. The other thing that I noticed about Blade Show that maybe it's an interesting nuance is that really only as a primarily sword person walking around Blade Show looking for swords to look at, the only time I stopped to look at knives was when they were exceptionally grand. And that's because you just get used to seeing something really beautiful over and over and over again, that it'd be you get numb to it. It's something that would normally stand out as the jewel of a collection. It just blends in amongst the chaff in this event, because you're just tripping over the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Not literally, it wouldn't be good to trip over blades, but there's a lot of them there. You can throw a rock and hit 1,000 Bowies you'd love to own that are have interesting lamination and mosaic Damascus and beautiful handles and hilt work. And you don't, not so much with swords, but that means that only the like crazy stuff really stands up. So I find it strange that you can become like immune to beauty at Blade Show, and like it's only the freaks that really stand out in one way or the other, just like divine looking or grotesquely awful. Like, but all what would normally be amazing work kind of just blends together a little bit. So when I talk about those amazing works, though, there are a couple that stand out. There was a gentleman who makes like dragon skin steel, dragon scale steel. I don't know. It was colorful, beautiful. It left an interesting pattern in the Damascus, and the workmanship had flowy, cool lines and colorations on it that were just absolutely lovely. And I thought it was like a higher tier of knife. And walking around, I saw some other examples like that. There was this rondel dagger that had, again, just, it was man jewelry. It was beautiful. It had intricate file or engraving work done all over this rondel, and interesting use of materials. There was a wood handle that felt like stone in hand. It was like cold to the touch, like a rock. Anyway, beautiful work there. There was another knife that told the story of escaping gravity, and I can't remember. I'm bad at names here, but immaculate, beautiful file work, tons of engraving, inset gems. It was a $40,000 knife, and the gentleman is like letting me handle it, asking me to wear gloves up. But looking at this thing really close and just seeing all of the beauty and detail. And incidentally, when I don't spot a flaw, I often think it's fun to ask the smith, like, where are the flaws? And every time they have like this is what I would change, the other thing. They're often their worst critics and know under the microscope where every single flaw on the knife is. And I thought that was also kind of an interesting nuance of those people that really relentlessly pursued perfection. They often like knew where they fell short and knew every single little nook and cranny of every flaw that they would just like to have spent, done differently or spent more time on. But I digress. There were some, the things that stood out are the things that like kind of push the boundaries of what you think humans are capable of doing, or at least that's what it did for me. And there were a lot of examples there that did that. I've only talked about a couple of them, but there were just a ton of beautiful works there. I'd also get to see a work from Vance Evans that had like a Cinque Dia style blade, lots of interesting fullering and intricate engravings and stuff on it. That was really fun. I got to visit the Casa Iberia booth and handle a bunch of swords, which incidentally I can tell you all have tight ito. So I know the last Tiger Katana that I reviewed had some ito that was loose. There was a Tiger Katana there. The ito was tight, and so it was on all the Dragon Kings and on all the other swords. I've given them a fair amount of grief. There we go. That's the word. For the loose ito that I felt on the swords. Every single one at Blade Show felt tight. So heads up there. It's might just be a problem that happens when shipping to Minnesota or something. I'm not sure. But I got to meet Patrick in person. That was nice. Handled a bunch of swords from Dragon King that I haven't before. I also got to meet Frenchy Jan, who is the guy who designs a lot of the swords from Dragon King and has also designed a lot of Suba and other works at Hanwei. And so, meeting the guy I didn't even know that he was the one that designed like a ton of this stuff from like the Hanwei Kame Katana and the Bushido and like some of the things that, swords that I were lust objects for me as a kid, the swords that I never thought I'd have the money to buy and now have owned. He's the designer of those themes and stories, and it was really cool to see his work in person, to meet the man in person. I enjoyed that quite a bit. And also got to meet Sunny from Valiant Armory. Got to hold swords that were not made in China, I own a number of swords from Valiant Armory that were made while they still imported things from China, and now they don't. They make everything in-house. It's US made, and it is an order of magnitude more expensive. And for that, you'd hope that you get something consistently better. And I am happy to say, in comparison to the Templar and Malatesta swords that I have in my collection versus the examples and wares that Valiant Armory is selling today, there is a significant jump in quality that you would hope would accompany that price increase, and it's there. The swords are all lovely. The scabbards are lovely. They are really, really excellent swords. Every one of them felt good. They all had, none of them bit into my hands. All of them were excellent, fun swords. And that Type 18 was really, really fun. I like that one, I think, the most out of the stuff that I played with there. The Vision series, though, was also fun. I got to hold a Tauber, which I'd held before, and it felt just like I remember I got to not exactly check consistency, but so I got a chance to handle a Tauber in the wild and then one at the show, and they were both excellent feeling swords. Anyway, I really enjoyed all the items from Valiant Army. I saw Zombie Tools, though I forgot to do any filming there. There was a gentleman at Plus 5 Armory as well, Joseph, who I might have on a live stream at some point. He made stuff the hard way, like in a coal forge, and he had a 1796 there, which felt like the bee's knees. It was a joy to hold. He really understands how a sword should feel, and every single sword at his table felt fantastic in the hand. And it was a joy to see that, and to hold it and hold the 1796 that he had made the hard way and like brazed parts of it on. But I wouldn't know that from looking at it. He told me like, hey, did you know this was made the hard, antiquated, like impossible way that they used to do it? And I said, no, I wouldn't have guessed. And it didn't show in the manufacture, but in feeling wise, it was amazing stuff. And all this stuff felt really good. So I at least remember Joe's name. But I digress. Blade Show was a ton of fun. I saw a lot of really awesome, cool things while I was there. If you're ever wondered if it's worth going, it is if you're at all interested in this hobby. There's works of art and people there that are happy to share their knowledge and interest and passions with, like-minded, curious people. So it's absolutely worth going. I had a great time in Atlanta as well. The city was very welcoming. I had an exceptional time in Atlanta. It was really good. And so as a visitor, I would totally go again. I don't know if I'll get to go for a while, but this was an event that I really did enjoy. I'm grateful that so many people took their time with me. And if you have a chance to go, I would absolutely recommend it. Anyway, that's all I've got. Cheers, and thanks for watching.